So here's a quick rundown on the gardening that's been going on here 2020. Locked in, right? Coronavirus. We all love it. This is early summer, late spring. Check it out. So this is what I'm calling the rotunda. It's just a little planter that I've been slowly building over the past few years, kind of in front of this is the shop, the sheet metal shop. House is over in Montgomery, the shop is over here. So I just kind of put this 4x4 up recently, and I got some hanging plants, so check it out. So we've got a verbena over here. Look at this purple. I don't know if the sun can play on it right to get the right color, but there's a pink one, and you can see all the amaryllis. There's some azalea. And I've got a little companion onion in here, which is flowering up pretty well. It's pretty cool. I have those in there, keep the pests under control. I have some azaleas here. The amaryllis is doing real well. I don't know what the name of these purple ones. Some kind of a lily. And there's yellow ones that come up. I just call them daffodil, but I'm sure that there's something else. And so here's some more verbena. There's just no way for a camera to be able to pick up the brilliance of these colors. And then there's a white verbena, and then there's some kind of a carnation. I forget the name of that. And over here, these are a couple oranges there were seeds that I spit at the old shop. That's been 15 years ago, and they grew, and when I moved about 8 years ago, I just dug them up, stuck them in a planter, and brought them out here and put them in the ground, and sure enough, they grew. Mom says they'll never produce anything because they weren't grafted. They're just a nasty old citrus. This was a nice little orange tree that kind of froze, but it came back, and apparently it came back over the graft, and it was beautiful a few weeks ago. Actually, in the early spring, it was lush. It had no yellow leaves. It was, for the first time in years, it had some blooms on it. I thought I was going to get some oranges. Now it's got zilcho, some kind of a nutritional deficiency. I'll figure that one out. Ah, here's a yellow. Woohoo! A little bit of yellow one. Can't make much out of it. So, check it out. Now, this is my attempts at keeping the squirrels out of the bird feeder. I fabbed up all this stuff. I even put orange thorns, and the squirrels just hop right over it. Little bastards are smarter than humans are. This is a tripod that I welded up. I just got this wild hair, and it took about an hour to make it. Just chopped up some pipe and welded it up to put some planters on. These are the wicking containers, which is going to have to be another video to explain exactly how these things work. But you can see if the shadows aren't defeating us. We've got some radishes and some beets. I'm trying to use companion marigolds in just about everything. Here's some of the basil. The basil didn't do well this year. I don't know why. Normally by this time of the year, I'd have 4 or 5, 6, 8, 10 basil plants. I planted 1 million seeds, and by now they'd be 18 inches tall. And I don't know, the insects got them. There's a cuke coming up. That'll be transplanted into another wicking container. Over here, we've got a couple more cukes and a marigold. And I'm just trying to get some more basils. There's some parsley. There's some lemon balm in this flower box. I welded this thing up. I made that in the shop. I welded that up. You can tell it's been a number of years now, but it works. Kind of trained some ivy to go up over the door. There's just a couple little things. There's a pea that was dying, and I just took it and stuck it in the pot, and it's coming up now. I have to transplant that. There's some oregano that I transplanted. I dug it up from a patch that is over there. You'll see it later. There's some hens and chicks. So these spices will go to Daddy Bob. Look at all this spearmint. I chop this up and I put it on a salad almost every night. It's really good, super nutritious. There's some more of these. I don't know, they look like amaryllis. I guess they are purple amaryllis, but this was full of daffodils also, what I'm erroneously calling daffodils. So I'm going along to the south side of the building. So there's a big building over here. So swinging back to the south, there's a tomato that was, I don't know, when I bought them, they were only about 6 inches tall. This one has some kind of a nutritional deficiency. It's putting out fruit, but it needs to go in the ground. That one's going to go in my next few wicking containers that I need to get finished. There's a big blackberry, which is the thornless variety. I bought 2 of them a few years ago, and the thorned one put out a ton of berries. This one did okay. The thorned ones were about literally the size of your thumb, and they were delicious. And it up and died last summer. It put out, both of these bushes put out tons of blooms, not one single berry. I don't know what happened. And then the thorned one completely died, just gone. And this one looks like it's healthy, so we'll see. I don't know why it's not making the berries. It makes the berries, and then they just turn brown and don't do anything. That's a little volunteer tomato that I transplanted. These are the sweet potatoes that they're coming back. I planted those a couple years ago when I harvested them in the fall, right before Christmas. I guess about the first week of December or so. So sometimes you miss them, and then they just come back. So you have more sweet potatoes. This is another planter that I welded up and mounted underneath the window. And you can tell all these little containers are the seeds that didn't come up on my first plant on March 5th. None of the stuff came up. Seeds were just too old, so I had to replant. So I lost about 3 or 4 weeks. You can see there's more little volunteer tomatoes. Here's some, little kales coming up that I planted in the shade of the tomatoes. These are all volunteers. I didn't plant these, they just came up. But I did transplant them because they're all clustered together. Must have been in the compost. You know, you throw a bunch of compost, the seeds, they come up randomly. So I spaced them all out. And the blackberries, when they make runners, I just cut them and I'll just stick them in the ground and hopefully they'll produce. They've never produced shit in 3 years, so I don't know. Maybe the process of doing that makes them non-productive. But anyway, you can see these random sweet potatoes coming up, marigold companions. So these are peas. I'm making these walls and these trellises. I'm making them where I've got peas and beans. I planted a lot of them so that I can, if they die, at least I'll have some. So you can tell we're gonna have a lot of tomatoes this year, unless the weather goes crazy. And there's a bank of aloe. I actually planted these. They were originally over here. The original owner had them, and I took a big handful a couple years ago and stuck them over here, and now they got them on both sides of the door. Anyway, so now we're getting into the tomatoes. This one looks like it's good. These are all in pots. By now they should have been in the wicking containers. I'm a little behind on getting materials. It's hard to get materials with this corona crap going on. And I've got some of these everbear. You can see there's, I don't know, I think I've got eight of these strawberries, and I didn't realize it, but there's a lot of different varieties of strawberries, and you can get the ones that produce a whole bunch of big strawberries all at once, one time a year. Then some of them will do twice a year, or you can have these guys they're just always spitting out 1 or 2 a week, and they'll do it all year. So if you're a real farmer and you have a lot of space, you have all the different varieties so that you're always having different amounts of strawberries. But you can see these are coming along. I mean, they're late. That's an early Susan, and that's got tomatoes on it. So moving around, keep on going south. There's a grape. That grape didn't do anything last year. The year before, it was all the way down over this arch that I built, and I had 2 or 3 bunches of grapes. They were kind of good. They're little bitty ones, about the size, a little bit bigger than maybe peas. I guess they call them champagne grapes. The ginger was look at that beautiful ginger. Woo. The ginger was super late coming back this year. I think because this is a low spot and it was just so much rain. But once I got some of these tomatoes hardened, I now have them on the south side. They're still in pots, but they get sun all day long, and they're finally now able to tolerate. These guys are pretty healthy. You can tell how they're real dark green, assuming you can see it in the light. And so the other day I got this wild hair, and I had some of this extra hog wire, so I just made a couple of arches, and I don't know if you can see it. So I've got these shades. It looks like Afro Town, but I've got these shade blankets up that I can put in the end of the day in this direction where the sun sets. The sun just gets so intense, and the tomatoes start to wilt. So I started putting these I unroll these tarps and I lay them over the top, and I'll deploy these. These are old shower curtains, which are great, and I just let them hang down, and the plants love it. They perk up within 30 minutes of letting them be in the shade. So these are pretty good prized tomatoes. You can tell that there's a companion of either a marigold or a basil in. See, this one's got a marigold and a basil, but these are destined. I'll show you in a minute where these are going to go. Now, this whole area here, this whole pool equipment wall is, you can see I planted this 3 times with intermittent beans and peas, and they just don't want to come up. There's a couple of them coming up. I guess I need to be more patient. A couple of them coming up, but the idea was to trellis them all along here. I don't know if it's a soil thing or sunlight. You can see there's a couple of them coming up. So this whole back wall here will be trellis. You can see I sheared off some of this 1/2 by 1/2 steel, and I'm going to make a trellis on this whole wall, because I planted like at least, I don't know, a dozen in here, and they should start to come back. There's a volunteer squash or something that must have come out of the compost, and it came up, and I transplanted it. Oh, there's a little pea coming up, another pea. There's the ginger. There's a volunteer tomato. I just moved it. Another one I put in the ground. A couple more cukes. So the cukes are going to be, you can see the strings on the cukes. So I put the strings, and then it gives them something to climb on. So hopefully when I check back in a few weeks, these will actually be coming up, and I'm going to let them crawl all along this arch. All along the arch. So I'll have, this will just be a complete cucumber haven in here if things go right. There's a couple more tomatoes. You can tell I think I've counted, I got 50 tomato plants. There's a basil I transplanted to try to get some basil. I like eating basil on my salads. So this barrel I made, let me get into the light, better light. This is just an old 55-gallon. I bought 7 of these, and the intention was to start making them and give one to Mom before she died. I thought she would appreciate it. But see that white, you're going, what's that white tube? Well, this one is, I made out of an 8-inch PVC, and I made another barrel. No, this is 6-inch. I made another barrel with 8-inch PVC. But most people are making with 4-inch central tube. The central tube, you take the cap off, and you can drop compost in, just food scraps, and then you populate this 55-gallon barrel with red wigglers. I don't know, like maybe, I don't know, I'll probably put 1,000 of them in there, and then they circulate. The white tube, you can't see it, but I have 3/8-inch holes. There's probably about 100 holes drilled in that, up and down along the axially along the pipe, and so the worms can circulate. They can munch on the compost and come back and forth through the soil, and they fill this thing full of worm castings. So eventually, once they get their microcosm developed, you won't ever need to put fertilizer, theoretically. And we've got a drain in the bottom, have a hatch. Oh, we can see the hatch, but anyway, I don't know if the light's good, but I can take that cap off, and I can pull the compost out. And then there's another drain where I can take the compost tea out, and I just put the tea back in. I just